On TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV.
Good evening and welcome to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham. You're with Talk. We're on TV, we're on radio, we're online, and we're on your smart speaker. Coming up, Michael Gove's desperate to woo voters by going hard on extremism at the 11th hour and trampling your free speech in the process. This is the Independent Republic of Mike Graham. Fasten your seatbelts and prepare for takeoff. Dr. Rakib Hassan there. Let me introduce you to our panel this evening. It's journalist Eve Tafik, it's broadcaster Sam Dowler, and barrister and broadcaster Andrew Eborn. Welcome to all of you. I suppose extremism hasn't really been a thing until relatively recently, and now suddenly we're having to define what it is, what it means, and who's an extremist, who isn't an extremist. I mean, I'm looking at a story in the Times breaking a few hours ago that an inner London council, Tower Hamlets in London, is going to start removing Palestinian flags that have been put up. You know, we've got all sorts of, moving parts here, and nobody seems to really know what the definition of anything is.
Yeah, and the real problem is this, is you've got to work out, well, what's the effect going to be? Because all they're talking about is that you can't engage with these organisations. Now, it's better than the 2011 definition, which talked about vocal or active opposition to fundamental British values, whatever they might be.
Right.
But the reality
that's the point.
Yeah,
that's not clear, is it?
No, it's not clear. And the reality is that you've got to have, on one hand, freedom of speech, but it's not freedom from consequences.
Yes.
So you need to be really clear.
But we already don't have freedom of speech in this country. Anyway, Eve, what do you make of it?
Well, I think that in the last few years, and social media in particular, there's been this sort of censorship wave going on. And the more we try and define things and box things in, including extremism or what have you, then we're going to get to a point when we can't talk about anything, we can't say anything, or we will be defined as X, Y, Z.
Right.
So, I think the definition will be fluid. I think it will change according to, what we should think is an extremist. And I think it will lose its meaning over time.
But also, who's making the judgment, Sam? Because, I'm sure that there'll be people out there on social media think, I'm a bloody extremist. Some people might think you are.
Exactly.
It doesn't make you one, does it?
Well, exactly. It's like Gove was saying about gender critical beliefs or LGBTQ trans beliefs, etc. Like there's, and I agree with you about social media. The way people speak to each other now is, I think, is markedly different to 5 or 6 years ago. The way, I can speak about LGBTQ things on Twitter/X, and I'm called a paedophile and a groomer, time and time again.
It's gone mad, isn't it?
It has gone mad, but also but we do have a problem with extremism. But I think I don't know why they've done this now in a classic messy way for the current administration. But we have things like domestic terrorism, for example, which is on the up. The incel culture, something that we should be afraid of. And it's too vague. It's too messy. Again, it's the Tory party trying to get some sort of win, but just completely missing the point.
They've been doing this for a while, Andrew. They're making new laws when there are already laws which would suffice perfectly well.
And as always, as brilliantly put, Mike, because the reality is, if you enforce the Terrorism Act, you've got these in place. Right. This is not a law. What this is guidance as to who they can engage with. Now, that's not going to stop it. You say, well, let's deal with the marches, because lots of extremists... This is not going to stop that.
No.
This is just about talking to the governments and so on and so forth. And the danger is you're shutting people down, and maybe the wrong people, and all sorts of other people are saying Jewish people will suffer, is one particular take in one paper today. You have a look at this sort of stuff. The difficulty is, if you don't have that clarity, people will suffer as a result of it.
Yeah, exactly right. And the point is as well, that if you are a terrorist or somebody who is even on the watch list as a terrorist, there are many things that you're allowed to do as a potential terrorist which are not actually illegal. Obviously you can't make bombs, and you can't threaten people, and you can't take people hostage, and you can't, commit a terrorist act. But you can read things that might encourage you to become a terrorist. You can go to speeches that might encourage you. You know what I mean?
But at what point do we become, in a sense, our own miniature Third Reich? We can't stop people.
You're on the tube and some copper comes on and goes, "What are you reading?"
We're going to burn the books. What's going to happen?
Yeah,
right.
And it's also, I think they're trying to show that they are doing something because of obviously the pro-Palestine marches and and obviously you've got your Suella Braverman saying that they're hate marches, etc. And it's messy. And I think they
because there's no common sense anymore.
No,
that's the point. And I've said this many times. Probably you may have heard me say it before. Take the marchers, put them in Hyde Park, so they can have a big rally there every Saturday if they want. But they can't keep walking down the streets of London, making everybody's life more difficult. whether you agree with them or not, it's a pain in the arse when they're walking through streets that you can't either drive down or walk down or can't take your family to because there's thousands of people taking the city over.
Same as climate activists. I'm sure some people would say, obviously, gluing themselves to the road is extreme.
Yeah, that's a bit extreme.
Yeah, but of course, exactly. So, like, you know, what are we going to do about it?
And then what are you going to do? Start arresting people for reading Greta Thunberg's book?
Yeah,
you know. I mean, I would personally. But, you know, that's just me.
Think while it's still not illegal to do so. I think it's exactly that sort of principle. But the reality is this: you've got to work out: are these protests actually converting anybody, or are they just alienating people? And this is the real problem, because a lot of what's happened is that the hatred and the vile discussions which have happened online are now spilling out onto the
streets. Do you know, I used to say this, that, you know, people would not talk to each other the way they talk to each other on social media.
Oh, never.
But actually, now they do.
Now they do.
No,
Now they actually do.
I think people have become ruder generally, and I think it's very noticeable. But what I will say about this is I think the way we now view protest is different. We don't view it as a way to affect change. We view it as an annoyance.
Yeah.
Whereas in France, they're making stuff happen.
That's partly because of the way that people are protesting. You know, in the old days, you'd go on a march and generally speaking, something would happen.
Yes.
You know, or you'd put pressure on a particular group over a particular thing. But what you wouldn't do is march repeatedly every single week for 23 weeks, which is what we've got. I think the 24th week's coming up this weekend. Yeah. You know, that's not a protest. That is a kind of, you know, that's something else. It's almost like it's an insurrection of some
absolutely. Kind. But the definition, to go back to the point, new definition, which Gove mentioned today, is not going to change that.
No, because it's an 8-line definition, I'm told, right?
Yeah, exactly. And as a lawyer, you sort of turn around, you want clarity. Yeah. All this is talking about is engaging with politicians. That's it. Won't affect universities, won't affect people on the streets and so on and so forth. So the effectiveness, the mischief you're looking at is not going to be dealt with.
Well, let's talk about the other story that kind of came in today, which was sort of off to the side, that 42 children were arrested for terrorist activities last year, which was the highest ever on record. It means the number of suspected terror teens increased by 31% compared with 2022. That's a pretty shocking statistic, isn't it?
That is absolutely shocking. I mean, what are they classing as children, though? Are these?
I think it's teenagers.
You know, 8-year-olds running around doing this kind of thing.
But also half of them are white, though, as well. The ones
that teenagers are still children, you know, by law.
Is the demographic any demographic in particular, or is it just children of that age are becoming more violent?
They define that. So basically, but it's lies.
Well, a lot of it has to do with prevent, you see, because, I mean, you can look at these statistics and you can take a view that they're being collected in a slightly different way, because Prevent have now got, they've been complained about, haven't they, by William Shawcross, the guy that sort of set it all up, who said, you know, they're now reporting kids who might think something wrong by reporting them to Prevent, and then they're one of these statistics. Yeah. Now, I don't know what they might have done to be reported, but the fact that you might be in a danger of committing some kind of terror offence might be just because you came in one day wearing a Palestinian scarf. Or you came in one day and said, I don't really like Jewish people very much, or, you know, I'd like to go and join the IRA. I don't know. You know.
Well, and that's the problem as well, isn't it? Because the reality is this, Mike, is that it's how you tell the narrative. It's the language.
Yeah.
You can have lies, damn lies, and statistics. The fact that someone's arrested doesn't make them guilty. And you look at the statistics, you narrow it down even further. The numbers are not that shocking, to be frank.
Yeah.
And they're fairly small in comparison with those who should be arrested and charged. So you get arrested, you get charged, you get convicted. Now we're talking about people arrested. You whittle it all the way down to people actually being charged and then convicted.
And then convicted.
It's tiny.
Well, it is, unfortunately, but you only need one, don't you?
Yeah.
Quick word.
What I was going to say, as at 16, me and my friend jumped over the fence at Sandringham because we didn't want to pay.
Right.
We wanted to see the palace. Soon we were surrounded by police and armed police and dogs because royalty was actually in residence and they gave us a warning for terrorism. Yeah. And we cried and said, please, we just wanted to see the gardens.
Right.
But I understand why that would be terrorism. We got let off. It wasn't a big deal.
Right. But see, that's common sense, isn't it?
See, that makes sense to me as an act of terrorism. Royalty was in residence.
Yeah.
So now it's a great dinner party anecdote.
Yes, absolutely.
But, you know.
Absolutely right. But that's the thing. So we'll be talking about this, plus an awful lot more, guys. Thank you very much indeed. You're watching The Independent Republic of Mike Graham. Coming up after the break, a new line for rotten rozzers taking bribes and abusing their position. We'll be back after this. Welcome back. You're watching the Independent Republican Mike Graham right here on Talk TV. Now, more than 700 investigations have been launched in 18 months after the Metropolitan Police's report a rogue copper went live in London. It's now being rolled out nationally, and heaven knows how many complaints they're going to get now. With me in the studio, former Metropolitan Police Superintendent Leroy Logan, barrister Andrew Eborn, former police officer Nusrit Mehtab joins me down the line as well. Very good evening to all of you. Leroy, this has obviously been quite a successful thing that the Metropolitan Police have done. Some people think it shows that they're kind of moving in the right direction to try and out some rogue coppers, but that's quite a lot of people to have been turned in by the public. And the worry I would have is that there might be people out there in the streets who go, I know, we'll dob this guy in it, and that'll be the end of his police career for a few months while they're investigating it.
Well, I think that they're going to try and ensure that there's no sort of vexatious litigants that are just continually complaining. But I think what we have here is that the rot has really set in with the Met. It's been going on for years. Mark Riley's trying to get to terms with it. He seems to be doing things in the right way. I wouldn't say it's a success yet, but he's taken the poison challenge from Cressida Dick, who allowed the culture to get more toxic. It ensured that there was a lot more of a hostile environment. There was no whistleblowing strategy, and the checks and balances of supervisors, inspectors and sergeant to hold their officers to account, maintain that critical distance. So there was ensuring that those officers were nipped in the bud if they had those tendencies to be a predator, sexist, racist, misogynist, etc. But, you know, it seemed like they felt they're untouchable because the person at the top, Cressida Dick, was saying, well, I'll defend you regardless. And things have just snowballed to the extent that it seems like the whole barrel's rotten, and not just
well, they
a
couldn't
couple
get
of
rid
bad
of they couldn't get rid of people, could they? Nusrit, let me come to you, because at the end of the day, what we're seeing Sir Mark Rowley doing is making a lot of noise about police officers getting abuse online. He's put out a request for some more money so they can all get paid a bit more, but he doesn't appear to have actually made that much difference. I mean, Leroy's right. He was brought in to improve things because under Cressida Dick they'd gone pretty far, but has he improved anything?
Unfortunately, Mike, no.
That's what I thought.
You know, made the right noises, the right rhetoric. I'm going to do this and that. You know, where are we? What changes have been brought in? Now, this hotline, corruption hotline, was brought in November 2022 in response to Sarah Everard and Wayne Couzens and Carrot and other things that were going on. Now, we say that 728 people have been reported to this hotline. How many of those have got sacked?
Right.
How many predators and monsters have they identified from this hotline? I know it's been rolled out nationally and it's considered a success, but what does success look like? For me, I need more answers to that.
Yeah.
So back to your original question, no, he hasn't. Is he the right man to lead this? Does he, you know, is the problem so big that it just is not happening? And certainly setting up this hotline, for me, is dealing with the symptoms. It's not dealing with the causes. The causes are quite clear. Vetting needs a radical rehaul, and we know that there was a review last month which actually said that, and prior to that. Recruitment needs to be looked at. Leadership, because the mechanisms within the Met are broken to identify these individuals. They got in, they were allowed to come in through the front door. They're in. How do we identify them? There clearly isn't a mechanism. They have to set up this hotline, and it's done to almost placate the public and get them off the front pages. In fact, it's not going to be success. It's not going to happen. No. They will still be on the front pages because what's needed is real radical reform of policing.
I think so, and I think, Andrew, that's going to happen nationwide, isn't it? Because we know there's problems in places like Nottingham. Yes. Manchester's been in special measures. You know, Newcastle police have been in trouble. You know, all around the country there is a problem. And Nusrit's right. I think the problem is that the police should already know, shouldn't they, who these people are? They shouldn't be sitting there protecting them and needing members of the public to let them know.
Yeah, well, without a shadow of a doubt. And we always say, or I always say, that trust comes in on foot and leads on horseback.
That.
I do.
say that almost every show.
I do, because it's so...
In fact, I might have to ban it soon. You know.
I sell the T-shirts as well. It's got to go.
Yeah.
That's the reality. And what's happened?
You'll be going out on a horseback.
Trust is at an all-time low. And as you just put a bit of clarity on this, the statistics are slightly different to what they've said. It's 3,000 complaints, of which 700 have gone to the next stage, leading to investigation. And you're absolutely right. We now need to work out how does that filter down. Lies, damn lies, and statistics. how many effectively are going to be looked into? And there's also that other question which came as a result of the report. You need to check about the pre-vetting of people before they get to the force in the first place.
Well, that's what we don't know, and that's what I meant to get from Nusrat. I don't know whether you know, Leroy, whether the recruitment practices have changed, whether or not anyone that Mark Rowley said he wanted to get rid of has been got rid of, because there was a problem, wasn't there, before, where it was taking a very long time to get people out of the force, even people who had criminal records. So is that speeded up? Has anything happened?
Yeah, but they speed it up, but it's so complex, you know, because, you know, as police officers were royal appointees, so they're not subject to employment law.
Right.
So there's all sorts of hidden complications. And then it's created this situation where the federation that supports a lot of these officers and Superintendents Association are able to use the system and delay things. I'm not saying they're doing it intentionally. They're there to protect their members, but at the same time, they're holding up the chains that's required. I know they changed, like the Parliamentary and Diplomatic Protection Group, where Carrick and Cousins came from.
That did need changing.
They shifted a lot out. So they can do...
But where have they all gone, though? That would be the question. Have they gone to another department? Well, are they out of the force?
Some have gone to other departments. Some are still on suspension. Some have left, but not the rate that you need to reassure people, because the biggest victim out of all of this is the public's trust and confidence. Can they trust that the officer that comes to report an investigation or update? I had 2 guys came round to my house today, 2 young officers, give me an update on someone tried to steal my car. Now, I felt reassured.
Yes, you're one of the lucky ones.
I've met them before. But it was really good to have officers giving me that feedback. How often does that happen?
It hardly ever happens.
Exactly.
That's the problem.
Then when you have an officer, can you be totally confident?
No, you're absolutely right. Well, I'll tell you what the worrying thing is about the statistics, however, and just to clarify one point, you can do it anonymously. So even if people make malicious calls, the reality is the majority are not being investigated. So if you're only getting 700 out of 3,000, it means the majority they're not following up on.
Again, as Nusrat was saying, I'll come back to you on this one, Nusrat, transparency is a problem as well, isn't it? Because we don't know who's really looking into these investigations, who's being given the number of man-hours to do so, how many people are being sort of employed to do it, and because inevitably that takes police away from doing the kind of work that Leroy's talking about, where they're actually solving crime.
Absolutely. And one of the things is that it's been operated by, if you like, volunteers. Now, if we look back to the new Met for London and the Casey review, one thing identified was that the Director of Professional Standards, the complaint department, was not fit for purpose. And I totally agree with you there, Graham. Where are these people coming from? They're the same people that were in the Director of Professional Standards that are now investigating and are on this corruption hotline. So if they were not fit for purpose in the first place, how are they now going to be investigating these officers? And it's a triage system. My understanding is a call comes in, the volunteers will look and triage it, and then they will pass on what they think has some credence to the professional standards team. It's still the same thing. You know, what we need, and I'll come back to it, is real reform, radical reform. Bearing in mind that the Metropolitan Police Service at this moment is about 6,000 officers short. So they're not going to get any new person with new ethics coming in. And ethics is the problem. And that has to be the golden thread throughout this. So for me, what I would like to see is the figures for this. At the end of the 728 investigations, I'd like to see some form of, this is how many people we identified, this is what actually happened. Because the public need to have faith, and they're reporting things, but what is going to be the actual outcome and result? And let's be clear here, the internal mechanisms are failing, they've failed, they're not being readdressed. That's what we need to strip back and concentrate on. Good leadership that identifies it, supervisors doing what they're paid to do, and that's supervise people. This problem isn't going to go away by setting up some form of hotline to get the Met off the front pages. And now they've said it's successful, so it's going nationally. I wait to see the outcome and the results of this.
Yes, I think that's a sensible point of view. Leroy, just finally, Nusrat says it's time for radical reform. I mean, can the police reform? I think that's the question.
Well, I think ultimately one Home Secretary or another, maybe not in this government, obviously, but maybe in the next government, will have to look at this, because I really think that they've been talking about reforming the Met for decades.
Yeah.
They've been talking since the last
For as long as I can remember.
Queen's Commission and everything. And I think the Met's too big, especially when you take on their national responsibilities of royalty protection, diplomatic protection, counter-terrorism. So take those things away from it, at least, so that the Commissioner can deal with by far the biggest police service in the country and get into the real minutiae, because, unfortunately, big strap lines, big buzzwords is not going to do it. The toxic culture has to be dealt with once and for all. There has to be great accountability of officers, so that, and especially if whistleblowers speak up, they need to be supported and not ostracised, as we see on a regular basis.
And the public needs to see a difference. Crime stoppers.
It needs to be seen to be done, as you say. Leroy, thanks very much indeed. Andrew, we'll see you a bit later on. Nusrat, thank you as well. Very interesting conversation. I'm not sure the police is ever going to reform before I die. We shall see. You're watching the Independent Republic of Mike Graham. After the break, we're going to look at Wills and Harry avoiding each other as Meghan melts down over Kate's popularity. See you after that.